Welcome into K-State Online. I am Mason Voth. That is Drew Galloway. Thursday, almost through the week. You don't have a football game that you have to watch this weekend. You can watch the other ones. You don't have to worry about K-State. We are going to talk basketball today. We promised that yesterday. Everybody's got basketball fever now, and it's not because we're particularly close to the season starting or because we have a Big 12 basketball schedule in front of us. No, it's because football's playing terrible right now. So people are like, I want to try and at least have some positivity. I was explaining to somebody the situation right now isn't that people are necessarily thinking K-State's going to be awesome at basketball and that, K-State basketball is back to where it needs to be, but it's a lot like spring training and baseball for K-State fans right now. Like, okay, well, you know that football sucks. Basketball, don't know. Like, yeah, they could be really bad too, but also there's a chance that, this team is best team in the country, just like every baseball team. Never know what could happen this season. So the optimism meter is high, although I think that it should be for this team, at least in one absolute way. So we will talk about basketball here in a little bit, but I think we needed to start the show by discussing something because earlier in the week, we had made note of it that it didn't take place. Chris Kleiman didn't have his weekly press conference that he normally does on Mondays. The argument could be made that that's normal after a bye week. However, we can look back and see during the first bye week last season after they beat Oklahoma State, he still had his regular press conference, did not have his weekly press conference during the bye week after they lost to Houston. So that's eyebrow raising when you come off of a second straight loss. You are now 1-3, and you haven't looked particularly good over the last three games. That K-State doesn't make Chris Kleiman available on Monday, after I think a lot of us that were sitting in that media room Friday night in Tucson were thinking, okay, we've got some bigger, more philosophical questions that need to be asked on Monday. Well, those questions aren't going to be able to come until this next Monday, which at that point, the focus probably shifts to UCF a little bit. So we could have made a bigger deal about that, I think. But there was not much of a need to at the time. Just, note that it was a little strange.
I'm still of the opinion that most of the questions will be related to post
Oh
Arizona.
yeah, I think they still will try, but it's one of those where I don't know. Like, will the answers be given that way, or will they be guided more towards looking at the future and in the game in front of them? That's
and with that, I'm also kind of in the boat of in a typical bye week setting, I would rather have one press conference, like either before, like leading into the bye, or one post bye. Having two without a game being played, I think, is a little overkill.
I would agree with that, except if you win, like what do I really need to talk to you about when you win? Things are going
That's
well, you're
true.
doing what you're supposed to. I think when it's this bad, and the precedent had been, last year after that first bye week, you got back to back, you doubled up. I'd like to hear what you had to say here, because I think there is more that needed to be dissected. But then you could think, okay, hey, he's still got his radio show that he'll do on Wednesday night. He'll be there. You'll get a little bit of insight from him in the middle of this bad stretch. K-State fans need to hear something from the head coach. Chris Kleiman wasn't at his radio show last night either. And there could be a myriad of reasons for it. We don't know. They didn't go into detail on why Matt Wells got the radio show duties last night and Chris Kleiman wasn't there. But I think no matter the reason you come up with, I can give you the answer that I think it's wrong or illustrates why there need to be some things that get reorganized with how this team is operating right now. I think when things are going as poorly as they are for K-State, the head coach needs to be available at least one time to be public for the fans and kind of give them the insight on how this thing is going. I don't think that 10 minutes after the game in Tucson is enough given the things that are going on for K-State right now. Like this team and this program is in a really bad spot. And I think it's the obligation of the head coach to be there and address those things. Now, if you say, well, like, maybe there was a personal matter or something else that prevented him from getting there. Okay, that's fine. Then I would spin it into something different and saying, well, then some other conversations need to be had and be addressed about the decision-making and kind of the bigger picture, longer drawn out impact of this. But just in fairness to how I see things, I think it's a bad look for K-State that Chris Kleiman did zero media this week after the start that they've had. You compare it to what they've done last year, and I think it was very unfair to feed Matt Wells to the Wolves. And I know that it's not like going on the K-State Sports Network produced radio show with Wyatt is going to be, an interrogation like what fans want, but you are putting, I think, a guy that it's not his obligation right now to be in that position. On top of it, though, I would say we've now gone 2+ weeks without getting to hear from K-State offensive and defensive coordinators Matt Wells and Joe Klanderman in their normal media session. And one of the answers when Chris Kleiman was asked about it, I think it was in the midweek before the Arizona game or it was after the Army game, he had made the comment, well, you're going to have to ask Matt Wells about that. Well, you can't do that when you don't have a media availability on a short week before Arizona, and then you don't have one before or during the bye week. So that's where my point comes to here is that when things are going the way that they are, you have to find some way to be forward facing on this. And you have to be able to be up there and be ready to speak and give the fans something to hold on to, or at least get an understanding, because leaving them in the dark, I go back to this a lot. This is not your program. This is the fans' program. At the end of the day, like, all this is possible because of the fans and the alumni, and you're doing it for them. And so I get that there are some power players in college sports. I get that these guys, like, they're entrusted to run these programs, but you are doing this for the fans. You have to be able to give them something. I mean, fans are essentially like stockholders in college sports,
especially now.
Yeah, exactly. And now some a lot more important, and I guarantee you that those are still getting some of the insight and some of the FaceTime. But college sports isn't possible without the common fan that doesn't have those channels to get there. That the only way they're getting what Chris Kleiman is saying or Jerome Tang is saying is what we're providing, press conferences here at KSO or other types of things. Like, that's their connection. You have to be able to step up and address those things when it's there. And I think K-State, as a whole athletic organization right now, has failed in the last week by not allowing people to hear from Chris Kleiman. And again, we don't know the reason for it, but I would just say that given the circumstances of how K-State has looked this season, no matter what you tell me the reason is for, I can spin it in a way that I'm comfortable spinning it, that what they've done this week is wrong.
Yeah, I think that you'd want to hear from the head coach at least at one point this week. Like I said, like, I'm more of like the bye week press conference followed up by another press conference kind of overkill before, but you needed to have something, and then not being at the radio show, and then not having a reason for it, just honestly leads to just more speculation than anything else. And I think that that's kind of like the last thing that this K-State team and how the program is operating right now needs. It is more speculation. So I think that with that, that's kind of like where I'm at is, I get why you don't want to post or say why somebody isn't there, but when you don't, it just leads to a lot of what is actually going on. And I think that is kind of where a lot more concern comes from is, there could be a million different reasons, and not, there are a lot of them that are not great, and only a couple that I'm like, okay, that makes you feel a little bit better, I guess. But so I think that that's kind of where I'm at, is that it just leads to a lot more speculation on a team and a program right now that doesn't need any speculation, because I think that right now, the only thing that they need to be doing is focused on doing what they need to do to fix this, and at least, don't go 1-11. So with that, it's more of just, there's a lot of reasons that it could be, and I'm very curious to why, because it's very unlike Chris Kleiman to not be at the radio show during the week.
Yeah, and that's part of where I'm coming from too on this, is that the obviously the on-field aspect of this program is not in a healthy place right now. So as we've discussed, it feels like maybe one of the reasons is that it's in terms of the makeup of the team, it's not in a great place. And so then you have the speculation when you don't do things like this and it leads to more questions. You at least need to kind of tamp those down a little and at least give some insight as to what's going on here. And not to say that what Matt Wells put forth last night wasn't sufficient in any way, given the circumstances and the medium that he was going on, but things are going poorly. You need to be able to hear from the head coach, especially when people have questions, and just want to be able to hear the guy who makes this all go. Like, end of the day, we've talked about it a lot. It falls at Chris Kleiman's feet. You want to be able to hear from him. It's the same thing that we've talked about in these different circumstances, that it's all about accountability. And if you're trying to show your team that accountability matters, then you need to step up and you need to do it yourself. And you can say after losses, yeah, this one's on me. That's easy to do as a head coach. It's also easy to, if you're that type of person, to spin it the other way and point it out. Like it's a tightrope on trying to find the right way to do it. But we're going to get ready to talk about basketball here. I thought Jerome Tang did a poor job at times last year of showing accountability. And then I think when he got to the point where he was doing a better job with it, well, at that point, the guys in the program were just shot for the most part in terms of you're not getting them back and roped in. And so, like, if you're trying to get guys to buy in, do they need to be accountable? The coaches and the head coach specifically need to be as well. And this is one of those things where when things are going good, these are platforms to promote your program and talk up your guys. When things are going poorly, it's a way that fans see it as you having to be accountable, live up to your obligations, and in a way also tell them, hey, everything's going to be okay, or this is what we're doing to try and make it feel better. And it doesn't mean that the fans are going to accept it, but at the very least, you're giving them an opportunity to understand or listen to what you have to say. But on the basketball front, I can guarantee you this, Drew. Only one thing that I can guarantee about this K-State basketball team is that from game 1 through game 30, whatever, people are not going to root against this K-State basketball team this year, in the sense of, yes, I know that if you're like me and a lot of other people, you would think, oh, I don't want them to do well. I want this whole, experience to end. I think we've seen that the last year of Bruce, the, parts of last season, whatever. But in the back of your head, most people are built to be like, yeah, as much as I don't like what's going on here, and yeah, a loss just ends it, it's a whole lot more fun if they just keep winning and doing things. And so you have that element, but that's not what I'm talking about. I don't think there will be a moment this year where the guys that make up this roster for K-State basketball are going to put you in a position as a fan to where you go, I don't want to root for those guys. Because too many times over the last however many years, I think there has been a point where fans have gotten to that stage. I don't expect it to happen with this team. And in turn, I think it makes it all the more likely that this team does bounce back, because when you have good guys mixed with, look, 2 of the 3 seasons that Jerome Tang has coached at K-State, I think have been successful relative to what he had to work with. Last year was an absolute failure. I thought that the basketball team handled things poorly last year at times. But obviously they were great in year 1. Year 2, given the circumstances that they had, I think they came close to maximizing what they could have done. When you lose Naquan Tomlin, when you lose Quez Glover, 2 guys that undoubtedly were going to be at least in the top 8 of minutes that season. I mean, Naquan Tomlin was supposed to be your best player the year that he got wiped out. So I think they've done a lot of good. I think they've brought in guys this year that will buy in and give 100% for them. And this staff has shown that when you have those guys that have that level of buy-in, they get close to the best out of you. And with what they have this season, I think that best should be, at the very least, a berth in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, my guarantee, if we're just going to have a couple guarantees.
Guarantee it.
is that this team is going to be a lot more together than the last team was. And I think that's pretty obvious, not just from the clips that you're seeing on social media, because, you know, there's a lot of competitive fireness with them. But I think that, you know, you kind of see that because they are posting so much on social media right now. Like, if you really go back and look last year, there wasn't a lot being posted throughout like Shark Week, or kind of like this lead up to the season, or Jerome Tang talking about all the transfers and videos. And then, you know, they have the print version where it's like 5 things to know about. The last one was Kamari McGriff. I don't think that that's necessarily a coincidence, do you?
No.
Like,
because, and you think about it, you had a lot more to hype up about last year's transfer class than this one.
There was so much more to like be potentially hyped up about, and really like show it off from like a social media strategy standpoint. We're like, this year, you know, your transfer class, I think it is still really, really solid, but it has one like flashy name with PJ Haggerty, and then you know, you get the Nate Johnson, the Marcus Johnson types, where I think they can be really, really solid. But like, it's not like, oh, Doug McDaniel, who averaged 16 points again at Michigan. Oh, it's Coleman Hawkins, who is a big personality in his own right. I think that it's very interesting how they're going about their social media strategy. And I think that a lot of that stems from this team being a lot more together and cohesive, and a lot more of a team than last year. And I'll give you credit because you were the one that posted it. I don't think that this team would go on a podcast and complain about Shark Week based on what we have seen so far from Shark Week, from the K-State social media.
Yeah, looks like guys that are locked in and enjoying it. And I think, you know, in some ways, like what we've seen, maybe the coaches made some changes to it as well. But I think that this is just a team that has been built into a more, you know, infectious state. And I would look at it too and see, like, you're going to get more out of the K-State coaches this year because last year was probably so dark for them. And like I can think back to my experiences, and my best work and the things that I've been most excited to do coincide with each other because, you know, when I worked at K-Man, I never was like, oh crap, I got to go do a show with John and Mitch today. Like, I was always excited to do that. When I worked with Alec Bussey and Gabe Swartz, I was like, I'm excited to go do this. When I joined UNDY, obviously I've been very excited about those opportunities. Not naming names, I did have one stop in there that, not just because it was early in the morning, I wake up and go, oh, and I know for a fact that the 2 years that I did at that place are the worst 2 years of on-air work that I've ever done, because my heart wasn't fully into it. It got sucked out of me rather quickly because of the people and the circumstances I was in that I had to work with. And I think that's pretty comparable to what this team and this coaching staff went through last year. We saw Jerome Tang have to do and handle things differently and out of the ordinary for somebody like him last season. And I think it's because rather quickly, this staff probably had a lot of the joy sucked out of them because of the things that they had to put up with and they had to go through. Now, look, that does not absolve them of the situation. Like, they are running the program. It does fall back to them. They brought those guys in. So, as we have been on record saying, they have to do a better job of evaluating the person side, because, look, we were also idiots last year. At least I'll speak for myself. I was an idiot. I thought they were going to be good last year. But you know what I don't have is a direct line to Coleman Hawkins or Doug McDaniel to know the situation and know how they're going to be. There are only a few people in Manhattan that were involved in that situation that would have had that insight. They have to be the ones that make the right decisions there. And I think we've seen a more concentrated effort this year to do that. We kind of knew it immediately. I mean, we've talked so much about the addition of Nate Johnson and going, a guy isn't the defensive player of the year in a conference if he doesn't have a little bit more of what you want on your basketball team. Not to mention, too, like some guys maybe so if all they can do is play defense, because, if they've got the offensive game of Javon Thomas, then, okay, you better be damn good at defense. Nate Johnson was also the player of the year in the MAC. So if there was a guy that could have loafed it, it's probably the guy that was player of the year worthy. And you go back and look, Barry Brown's offense at K-State over the last 2 years of his career would have been A-okay if he wasn't as much of a player on defense as he was. He still would have been on the floor just as much. He still would have been plenty valuable to K-State, but it was that mindset that made him a legitimate guy. And he went out there and did it. And so I think that's where we're seeing this year. They've done a better job of it. And I'm very confident that when guys buy in to what Jerome Tang and his staff are selling, they will get the better out of them. And it doesn't mean that this is going to, go perfect this year. They're not going to go unbeaten in non-conference play. They didn't even do that in the Elite Eight season. I don't know that they're going to be a top 5 or 6 team in the Big 12, but I think they're going to be good enough to make it to the NCAA tournament. And I don't think that you're going to look at this team, even if things go a little bit south of where you expected, that there's going to be so much of an apathy and vitriol directed towards basketball, because I think you have a bunch of guys that people can buy into, be excited about, and there is clearly a re-energization of K-State basketball right now because of the guys that you brought in.
And I think that a lot of that, again, goes back to what they're doing on social media. It's a lot easier to want to buy in and really want to appreciate these players who a lot of them are only going to be in Manhattan for a year if you know more about them. Like last year, and even the first team that Jerome Tang had, you didn't really know a lot about the guys beforehand. We're like now, I think of the first one that was of the Tang talking transfers was all about Abdi Bashir. This last one was about Kamari McGriff, and you're going to get one on every single transfer. It makes it a lot easier if you know things about them that like aren't just on the court related, and you hear that from the head coach or you see it on a social media video. And they've done a really good job of really promoting that and promoting those players over the last handful of weeks, kind of leading up to the season, as we're 47 days away, I believe, from the opening game of basketball. So you kind of see all that, and it just makes it feel more refreshing and more enticing. It's something actually that football has done very well throughout their entire time since 2019, of like seeing more behind the scenes of like workouts during the spring or winter workouts, or during training camp they have a bunch of videos. Like basketball is starting to get into that, and it just makes it so much easier. And especially when you're turning over a roster, how do you want to get fan buy-in? Let's take a video of some of these guys working out or practicing or doing something off the court altogether. Because in this day and age, and especially again in basketball, when you have so much roster turnover, it can be easy to be like, I don't really care. These guys are all going to be here for 10 months. We just had a team that a bunch of guys were only here for 10 months. Why should I care? Now you're seeing a little bit more about why you should. And I think that it's very, very refreshing, because I think that this team and the makeup is so much better. And I just keep going back to, you're not going to hear anybody complain about what they've done this offseason or complain about it a whole calendar year later, like somebody else did on K-State's basketball team from a year ago.
Yeah, I don't even know who you would be talking about there, Drew. I think, were there complaints by guys last year on podcasts that they sometimes did or didn't show up on that had their name on it?
Or quite literally yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just, I think this team is going to be built a little bit differently in terms of the mindset that they have, and that will be a good thing for you, the K-State fan. So
I also think I'm not going to guarantee this, because that feels a little rushed here. But my factor fiction this week, because I wanted to shift over to basketball a little bit, is talking about I think that K-State is going to shoot better from three this year than they did last year. Because I think that adding Matthew Driscoll, his offenses at North Florida, always good at shooting the three. They were in the top, I think, 160 last year. K-State was in the bottom 10 of power conference schools at 32.5%. It's not a high bar to reach. I think that, you bring in guys that can shoot it, like Kostic, like Rapier, like Haggerty. Nate Johnson is capable from three. I think that you're going to get better spacing, which will open up, more lanes to shoot. And I think that you're going to have like better opportunities and get guys in better situations to shoot than you have even the last 2 years. Because, I mean, last year, K-State still shot it better than they did the season prior because they were at 31.6%. So these aren't high bars to reach for a team.
Yeah, it sounds like we're talking about Jeff Mitty's team shooting from three right now.
It's not a high bar to reach, but I think that they're going to be able to shoot better from three. And I think based on some Jerome Tang interviews lately, you're going to see K-State play faster.
Well, you would probably think that, because if you go and look at last season, North Florida under Matt Driscoll, they were 15th in offensive possession length. Overall, their adjusted tempo on KenPom, they were 10th in the country. And to your point, over the last 14 seasons at North Florida, in terms of three-point percentage, they have been 35%, 35.9, 36.4, 32.4, 36.2, 37.8, 33.9, 37.5, 34.7, 40.9, 38.1, 35.4, 34.2, 35.8. They have shot it at a more than acceptable level. They've been in that top half every time except for once or twice, and a couple of those years were like top 40 three-point shooting teams in the country, and that 2016 team that was 40.9, they were 8th in the country.
And something, again, to just kind of keep an eye on as the season progresses, the last handful of seasons, North Florida has a great guard play. And, you don't just see that like with them playing the Atlantic Sun. Like you saw guys transfer up a level and play really well at the power conference level. So that's something to kind of keep in mind, especially because this team that K-State has is so guard oriented. Like, do you see, I don't know how much higher PJ Haggerty can go, but like, do you get a little bit more out of Nate Johnson than Akron even got? Is the bar too low for what we have for like Andre Kostic as an example? Like, do you see,
I think it might be.
Do you see somebody like CJ Jones even maybe take a jump because the guard play at North Florida has always been so good?
Let's not get crazy.
So like there are a lot of like fun things to really think about because of how good North Florida was offensively. It might be, I guess, I don't think that it's like crazy to say this. I think that is the best hire that Jerome Tang has made so far.
Yeah, I think so. If you also go and look at something that would excite me, Driscoll's teams at North Florida over the last X amount of years, in terms of how much three-pointers made up their total shot attempts, they were number one in the country the last 2 years at over 54%. They were 6th, 8th, 14th, 1st, 36, 39, 51, 6th, 29, and 20 over the last 10-plus seasons. So they understand where the math of basketball is, and the most important thing you can do on a basketball court is make a three. So
three is
music to my ears. Yeah. Hey, have you listened to the 30 for 30 podcast about the guy that was like one of the first big adopters of that mindset?
Oh, I actually have not.
You should go listen to it. It's very fascinating. He's from Kansas. A guy named Martin Manley is what it was about. It drew me in. Ryan Russillo had Craig Kilborn on his show like 2 months ago or whatever, and they used Craig Kilborn former Sports Center host, also the originator of the line, Richie Bitchy and Clark the Dork from Benchwarmers. He was in that movie. as you know, sitting there as Fairy Jerry. But he was on there talking because they had him voice this guy Martin Manley, who big into stats, wrote books called Basketball Heaven, and it was all about like he's trying to be like Bill James for basketball. And he taught it was all about, you need to shoot more threes, or, this is what's actually important, trying to find a way to value guys over just how many points they scored. It was like advanced analytics, but also kind of basic advanced analytics. But he's a very like calculated guy. Worked for Kansas City Star for a little bit towards the end of his life. And then on his 60th birthday, killed himself. Has a whole website. You can look it up and go read it. But like it was, he planned on doing it, and it was like 60th birthday, efficient life, boom. It was wild and very fascinating to listen to. It's how I spent my time in the air to and from Tucson last week, was listening to the 30 for 30 podcast about Martin Manley. So, I mean, hey, you guys were probably living in Topeka at the same time. He was a Topekan.
Oh, we probably were. That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's just, we're talking about threes and stuff, and got me thinking, like, I'm still mind blown by it. I'm fascinated by this guy. But yeah, anyways, there you go. We can leave it at that. We're excited about K-State basketball, and we will get to hear from Jerome Tang on Monday. He's got media availability in the afternoon after football is supposed to have a press conference. So you'll have a lot of stuff coming on Monday discussing everything going on with K-State sports, the bad, football, the good, basketball. And I doubt any of us would have thought that those would be words we'd be saying 20 days ago, but here we are. So we'll see what next week holds. We'll try to get DY on here tomorrow. No game, but we'll still do a little Friday action with him, get his thoughts on the state of things, and then back to normal next week with a football game week and everything else that we have in store, and plenty of other written stuff going on over at KSO right now. There is some basketball, there's some recruiting, there is also some other stuff with some think pieces about what is wrong with K-State football at this point in time. I'm sure you haven't had enough of it if you're a K-State fan. For Drew Galloway, I'm Mason Voth. Thanks for watching and listening to K-State Online. Back again tomorrow to close out the week.